The cohort, it is 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, which means that it is time for Pilum Teaches DCS. We got a few things we're going to be going up to do today. The first one, we're going to be taking up the A-4 Skyhawk today. We're going to go through startup, basic navigation, working the ECM panel, and some of the little bells and tricks on that one. We're going to use the AGM-45 Shrike. We're going to employ the air-to-ground radar, and in conjunction, do radar-directed bomb drops. Should be a good time. Let's go ahead and get into it, and we'll talk a little bit about the jet, both in the DCS context and in the historical one. Get right to it. Okay. Close the door here. Let's go ahead and mosey on out to our jet, and we'll do our walk around. We're flying an A-4 Skyhawk in aggressor colors here on our usual NTTR testing range. On the outer pylons, we have the AGM-45 Shrike. I have these currently tuned to the flat face search radar and the fire can radar. On the inboard pylons, we have some Hydra 70 rockets, the M151s with high explosive warheads. On the center line, we have 3 Mark 83 bombs. And of course, we have our Colt Mark 12 autocannons there in the wing root with its extremely limited handful of seconds worth of fire. The A4 is not a module for DCS, but it is a free to download community mod. And this one features a full fidelity clickable cockpit. It features a functioning ground radar for targeting. It can operate off the boat, however, I would not operate it off the supercarrier, and we'll talk about why some of that might be in just a minute or two here. Built from the ground up as its own issue and thing. It can do in-flight refueling. And if you were to ask me about it, it is the kind of airframe that would make for the most ideal starter plane in DCS. And if you buy if you just download DCS, you get a few free aircraft for free, namely the TF-51 training Mustang with no weapons on it, and the Su-25T, which never actually saw active service. It was too expensive, so they had to austere it down a little bit and turn it into, I believe, the TM is the variant that is closest to that. But with the A4, you can kind of do everything. You can do carrier operations. You can do light ground attack. You've got sidewinders you can carry on board the jet to do a little bit of air-to-air, gun pods, bombs, radar, air refueling. Like, if there was one fixed-wing asset that could do just about everything in DCS on the cheap, this is the one to have. This is the one to get. Especially because in its current format, it would be entirely free for you. All right, let's go ahead and get into the cockpit. We already have the ground power connected, so we've got our little cart here that's already putting the work in. Just recenter my head tracking here so we can look into the jet where we need to. As with most things, your engine control panel is on the left side of the aircraft near the throttle quadrant. Most of these gauges and buttons and dials will work. Some of them will not, and understandably those are going to be ones that when you mouse over the objects, nothing happens. Let's turn on our interior lights here just a little bit. Turn on everything but the probe lights. Pinky switch for the master exterior lights is on. A little bit of illumination there. So with ground power connected, engine startup is fairly easy. Press the large starter button located behind the throttle, leaving the throttle locked down. We'll wait on the engine to hit about 10% RPM on this gauge here next to the radar. And then we're going to right-click the throttle once to ignite. You can hear the clacker going off there for it. Once the engine throttle starts coming up, or RPM starts coming up, right-click again to turn the igniter off. I'm going to go ahead and put a lot of our systems here in standby mode. But that is engine start. Let's go ahead and get the ground cart off the jet.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now off.
We don't take that cart with us. Bring the canopy down and lock it. So up here we have our countermeasures, including what's remaining in both bods. In this particular case, I have flares in number 2 and chaff in number 1. But some folks out there will do double flares to try and, guarantee or help to guarantee that they will actually avoid a missile. In this case, we're not going to change it. We're just going to leave it as is. This lower box here is our ECM box, which includes the APR-25 and APR-27 systems. We want to turn all of those on. We're going to put it in standby just for now. This outer ring is the missile alert, which is what we want to know when we're both getting shot at and when our Shrike is actually aiming at something. And on the inside is the PRF volume control, which I'm going to leave down for now until we get a little closer to the SAM, and then we'll turn that on so we can listen to it. I'm going to put that in receive mode. And it should come out of standby on its own when it's ready to go. Flip our navigation switch over to land. And destination 1 for our steer point selector. Very similar to the A-4, there's only 2 waypoints that can be stored. You have your present position and your destination position. And it will remember the 2 destinations as you toggle between the 2. Up here for our BDHI, we can go with navigation computer. Show our needle's direction. It's area on the compass. We don't have walleyes, unfortunately, because that requires information that the mod just cannot access without an actual API. But we do have our Shrike selectors. We have our low altitude profile and plot, which when we start cruising around through the air, we'll be able to see that. Let's go ahead and put that SAS in standby. On this lower panel, we have our ripple control settings for dropping bombs or firing rockets. My intention is to drop bombs first, so we're going to go ahead and put that in single. I don't want to do any ripple shots with the bombs because I've only got Mark 83s on board, so we want to really be careful with that. And of course, we have our master armament panel and our pylon selection panels here. top screen over here with the little red nighttime guarded flap is our radar display. Just depending upon which mode you're using it, you either want to, monitor your aircraft there on the left with the terrain following type mode, or you can kind of manually do terrain following radar with it. Again, this is a free mod. This is not a module. It's got that capability. Or the center line for ground attack here on the bottom. Radar altimeter currently dialed in at about 500 feet for minimum altitude. But with that, let's go ahead and settle ourselves in for taxiing up the runway here to Creech. A little bit of throttle here. And unlike a lot of other aircraft, it does not have a nose wheel steering option, so all of your turns are done through differential braking. Hold down the right brake, get the aircraft to start turning to the right. The A-4 is an older design. This is one that goes back to the 1950s and the earliest adventures with jet fighters. It was brought about as a request from the Navy to give them a light attack fighter. Morning, Chief. The A-4 is unique among Navy aircraft. We have coffee in the cup, and actually I'm using one of my new Christmas gifts too. I was given a mug warmer that I can have here on the desk. So it'll keep that coffee nice and warm for me and as I'm flying around. The A-4 is unique among Navy aircraft in that it does not need or require wing folding mechanisms to be small enough to fit on board the carrier deck. It's an extremely small aircraft. It can pack a lot of punch for its size. During the Vietnam War, it saw a lot of combat use until ultimately being replaced by the A-7 Corsair II, fulfilling the same sort of light attack role. Definitely a workhorse. I think there's even some nations around the world that use it. I think it might still even be used in some more advanced formats as an aggressor type aircraft. It is very small and has an incredible roll rate. And with modern engines, it can actually do rather well. The one that's modeled here in this mod is an older aircraft, suitable for Vietnam hijinks. So straighten the nose out here before we start our takeoff roll. Which means that the engine has a lot of spool up time from when you give it a command to when it actually starts providing the asked for power. So when you are coming back aboard ship, you do want to try and treat it a little bit like a Tomcat A. You're going to want that spoiler brake out, or not the spoiler brake rather, but the speed brake out, and use higher engine RPM settings to counter that. So if you do have to get away from the boat quickly because your sink rate's too high or other issues, that you can just pull the pedals in and use your high RPM setting to get away. Alright, let's go ahead and drop the flaps a little bit. Flaps indicator is up here underneath the gear lever and next to the gear indicator. We have our gun pylon or gun pod switches for using the high peg or other gun pods. You can charge, clear, or turn off the gun pods from there. We have our APU information there. Our JTOW system, which we don't actually need to do anything with, but it's there. And the spoiler arm for field landing operations. We're going to go ahead and take off now, and there's going to be an ad break for some of you there here in just a minute. And we're going to start cruising towards our usual combat area. and we'll have ourselves a little bit of fun. $150 knots, start easing back on the stick here. All right. So for those of you who are still with us while the ad is playing, very much a workhorse aircraft. Post-Vietnam service, it saw use as an aggressor. Perhaps most famously, you can kind of see that in the movie Top Gun, as they are the aircraft that Jester and Viper are flying as aggressor aircraft against the F-14. Just like with the U.S. Air Force, choosing either the T-38 or F-5 as their aggressor platform, or Red Flag, to mimic the flight characteristics of the MiG-21, the Navy used the A-4 for the same purpose. And this dissimilar air combat training is really kind of what makes a difference in training pilots to deal with that kind of scenario and situation. Because in Vietnam, we had a lot of F-4s early on, we had F-8 Crusaders early on, and people thought the age of the dogfight was over. It was all going to be done by missiles and long-range fire and the whole 9 yards. And then they started losing aircraft to MiG-15s and inferior non-afterburning, non-supersonic aircraft, because we had lost the art of the dogfight. And these big, heavy fighters just were not as agile as their lighter weight counterparts. And that, you know, you can make an aircraft that goes Mach 2, and that's great, but as soon as you start turning the aircraft one way or another, those airspeeds really fall off very quickly. It's what eventually led to a program to replace the F-4 as the fleet defense aircraft with the F-14. And led to some redesign changes both for the F-4, for the Air Force especially, with the F-4E and its little dogtooth leading edge slats and everything else. A lot of good lessons. Alright, so while we are climbing out here, I'm going to turn up our PRF volume. And turn down the volume for the Shrike, so it doesn't blast everybody's eardrums out. I believe it is the right pylon that I've got that on. We're about 14 miles away. Pick the nose up here a little bit. As we should hear some obvious tone changes when that SA-3 starts looking at us. Alright, we are detecting that site. Now I am going to test something here. As we're close to about 10 miles. Because I'm actually carrying the Shrike with a loft seeker on it. We're going to treat this like the A-4. We're pulling straight up. About 30 degrees up. Magnum. Watching that side, I want to see if he shoots at me. Oh, that ain't gonna make it. And that's him looking at me to shoot me. Alright, so that one did not work as intended, which is good to know. We'll just go ahead and grab a new jet real quick, start it up, cruise on out there, and we'll use direct mode on that weapon instead and get closer. If I was a little bit faster, we would have been more fine on that as we got down behind the hill. So let's do this a little quicker just to get started.
Copy. Ground power is now on.
Thinking about it, we're going to change our loadout here. It's the left pylon. It's the right pylon. Direct.
Request rearming. Copy. Rearming complete.
Yeah, that's all good there. Let's go and ignite.
Overlord 1-1, passing waypoint 1 at 20,000. Overlord 1-1, on station at Vol 322 for 130 at 20,000. Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now off.
All right. There we go. Once more, a little more feeling. A little less getting killed by the SA-3. Kind of edge of the tarmac there, taxing a little quick as a no-go. Telling me there was an obstacle in my way. TC is the terrain following mode, terrain contours. Turn the gain up a little bit. We should be able to see that as we get cruising here. Open the flaps up here a little bit as we get above 200 knots. A little more smooth of a takeoff. Very heavy for the A-4 though. There we go. As we dial that brightness up, you can see the ground returns from the radar. And our flight profile line. That's fixed, but it does look an awful lot like the F-15's terrain following radar, and should probably be identical to most of the radars that you would see for that purpose. And we do have an audible tone as we get our nose pointed down to something which might be in our way. And just as a note for folks too, that this is a logarithmic scale left to right. So things that are extremely close to the aircraft are going to be over here on the left, and it gets much, much further away as it goes, rather than like 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 miles. Okay. Let's go ahead and turn north, and we will try and attack our friend the SA-3 side again. We'll start with the strike in direct mode. And then we will follow up with rockets and or bombs. Going to take this out of terrain following mode for now, and we'll select it in air to ground mode. That was our low altitude warning. As we had briefly crossed, go and dial it down to 200 feet. Briefly crossed that threshold. Scooter is a good plane. It's a nice little fun plane. And much like the F-4, it's got a lot of technologies, quirks, and habits to it that are not as push button as they are in other aircraft. It will jitter, jolt, and shudder, much like the F-14, when she's flying in ways that she doesn't like too much. Alright, master arm on, pylon selected. Use our rotator nozzle to go all the way around to Bob's GM arm. Shrike is giving the general growl. And we are closing to within about 10 miles of the target area. Now, at the moment, that SA-3 site is behind that hill. I'm going to sneak up on it. And we're going to pop up and kill it. Aiming the Shrike is very similar to what it is in the F4, except we don't have needles and a director to point the way for us. So you just kind of have to listen to the tone and use your crosshair on your HUD glass there. Six miles. It's about the furthest I would expect a direct mode weapon to work. Four miles popping up. Eyes on the sight. Go ahead and aim at it here. Should hear a change in that Shrike here momentarily. Oh, you got to be kidding me, Shrike. Oh, there it goes. No, it picked it up. Okay. Good so far. Now let's see if we can surprise. The KS-19 battery in a similar fashion without drawing fire from the Shilka. If you want to watch last week's VOD, I used them in loft mode and killed an SA-6 with them in the F4. I think we had about a 75% hit rate with Shrikes last week. Let's see if we can go 2 for 2. That is the fire can. I'm going to chance it. We might be outside of his actual search cone, so it's not seeing it. We're getting kind of close, though, so we're going to have to deal with that battery there. I think we're going to aim at the Shilka first. It's a little more dangerous to us. So let's go ahead and select our center lane pylons. That's going to be our Mark 83s. And we're actually going to take this weapon function selector and go down to computer, which will allow us to use the air-to-ground radar here. And as you can see, it's kind of doing a vertical scan there for us. That tells us that the radar actually can't see the ground, and that it is not providing ranging information. And as we point at the ground, that line will stabilize, which tells us that the radar is looking at something, and because we're in computer mode, it will provide ranging information to the very simple computer on board the aircraft, which we can then use for bomb release. Unlike the F4, you don't have to tell Jester, because it's a single seat, to lock anything up. It will do that automatically as soon as you start pressing the pickle button. And you're going to want to hold that pickle button, and just like DT mode in the F4, nose up gently until the bomb falls off the jet. So our target is this Shoka battery. Try and get a little more altitude here. We're going to have to struggle bus up to it because, you know, no afterburner. And we will execute our attack. I might pause in the middle of it just to kind of talk about how some things look as we dive in for our attack. Once the Shokas are dead, we'll drop our next 83 on the fire can battery there. KS-19s and X-60s with a radar director, especially since they're actively shooting at us. Alright, so we're going to put our crosshair on the target. We can see in the bottom right-hand corner there that the radar has stopped sweeping up and down. It's actually looking at the target area right now. I want the bomb to go right about there. Pressing and holding the pickle button, nosing up, trying to reduce roll if I can. And that bomb is off the jet. Let's see how we do. Close enough for government work. Alright, KS-19s are up next. And their associated director. Roll in on them. And press and hold. Nosing up. Bombs away. The more evenly you can make that pull up, the better. That's going to affect your accuracy. But keep in mind that this was also a time frame when we used a lot of unguided munitions, and our solution to a lot of that problem was to drop more of them over a target area. It would probably, in most cases, either be right on the target if you flew it really well, or if you had a little bit of wiggle slightly off the target, but still effective. Alright, we've got one more Mark 83 on board. There's still a Sparka battery out there that is shooting at us. They're located at the crossroads here of our favorite punching bag. So we'll go pay them a visit. Rolling in, we're getting ranging information on the radar, which is good. That's what we want. Looks like a good hit, damaged some other vehicles in the area too. Alright. Let's have some fun with some salvo mode on the rockets, because we got a bunch on board. So let's go ahead and activate stations 2 and 4. Come on down here to our ripple selector. And we're going to go on the right hand side here all the way down to salvo. Set our interval a little nice and tight. And we'll just dial it up to all the rockets on board the jet. Got about 4,000 pounds of fuel here in the tank, located just above our little picture there. Let's find something nice to destroy with rockets. Doing all right. Also, welcome both first-time chatters. Good to see both folks here doing the things. There's a couple of MTLBs there in the middle of that compound. It's a little underwhelming for our rocket barrage. You know, we've actually got an unattended target we'll go drop these rockets on. We'll have more Boomba. Appreciate the follow. Thank you for the follows there, Cowan and Steggy 2023. All right, so we're going to push out south to the unattended target range, which has just a couple of little mock-up areas to drop bombs and fire rockets and all that other nonsense with relative safety. As long as you don't blow yourself up or hit the ground, that should be enough. And we'll grab more weapons to come back up here to Yucca Pass and deal with targets that can shoot back. There's still some autocannons down there and some other guns that might pose a minor threat to us if we're not super careful with that. I mentioned earlier that I talked a little bit about using this A-4 on the supercarrier with DCS. It's not something that I would recommend, mostly because the deck crew that comes with the supercarrier relies upon giving certain instructions that the A-4 cannot perform. Mostly the wing folding. That's the problem. Launching off the ship is not so much an issue, but recovery is. As you come out of the arresting gear, you'll get the signal from the directors on the deck to go ahead and fold your wings. You know, the A-4 does not fold its wings. It does not have wing folding mechanisms. However, for all purposes, as far as landing on the boat and everything is concerned, since this is a modded aircraft, it sees you more as an Su-33, and it is waiting for you to fold those wings up that you cannot fold before it will let you proceed. So especially if you're using like AI aircraft that are coming back in to recover on the boat, they will stop in the gear and block traffic for everybody else. So you really do, if you're going to be doing carrier-based operations, you're going to want to go ahead and use the CV-59 Forrestal, which does not have deck crew, so that everybody can kind of just touch down and move and do what they need to do and not be in the way. As even if you are operating on a boat with no AI for the supercarrier, the people on the ground, your directors, are not going to steer you to a parking spot, and they're not going to give you the catapult rearm information because it's waiting on you to fold your wings and get away out of the gear. It'll keep the deck fouled so that, you know, other people can't get their proper calls and whatnot to come in and land. Now we're going to aim for the center of this little lozenge-shaped target, just on the other side of this SA-2, and barrage it with rockets and see how we do. No, we were not in the right selector mode there for it. We're still in computer. Come back to rockets. That wheel there is really your pride and joy for employing your weapons. Everything but the guns and gun pods, really. Actually, I think it might have a position for it. No, it doesn't. Not for guns. Guns are just armed when you flip the switches up. And definitely an aircraft you need to think ahead with in a lot of ways, because as you wind the turbines, or the turbine rather, it's singular, down in power, it's not going to spool up quite as quick. It's an older engine, which can lead to problems when you need power right now and you hadn't planned ahead for it. All right, here we go. Not bad as rockets go. Little ka-chunk tells us that our autocannons are armed. Welcome back from the ad break, folks. Those of you who participated in that. We don't have a lot of rounds left in the gun, but see if we can't finish off this last little part of this radar portion of the SAM target. And then we'll return to Creech and get more weapons. Probably got one more burst left in us on that one. Alright, back to Creech we go. We will rearm. Adjust my seat here real quick. There we go. Rearm and proceed with another attack. Made waypoint 2. Creech. Start reducing power here. Here's our runway. Yeah, we'll go and put the radar back in standby. I don't need to microwave any ground crews chocolate bars they might have hidden away in pockets. And just like the F4, we're going to go and move the seat up. So we're going to look down the nose. And we'll arm the spoiler brake system. A little bit of a crosswind as I remember here at Creech, so we'll come a little bit right to line up a little better. Might have to crab it in just a little bit, but I'm using quite a bit more engine with the speed brakes deployed. So if I have to abort for any reason, all I got to do is pull the pedals in, and the engine is already at high RPM. We can start really increasing power, speed if we need to. That's really kind of the big secret of older engines like the one in this jet and in the F-14A, the TF-30s. Now landing the B model Tomcat aboard ship or down here on the runway should be done with the brake in. The A model Tomcat, you kind of want the brake out. That's a better procedure. And it's for exactly the same sort of reason that if you need power right away, it is quicker to pull the speed brake in while leaving the engine at higher RPM. Than it is to ask for the engine to give you power quickly, which it just cannot do. Morning, Jolly. It's our low altitude warning as we cross the 200-foot mark. And get back on AOA here. A little fast, but we should be able to settle it out. Not on center line, but we're home. You can see that spoiler brake system. It's the top half of the flaps there. Really putting that work in to slow us down. Yeah, it's a good airframe. I like light attackers like this too. They're a lot of fun. I am at my heart a heavy fighter person though. I much prefer the F4, the F-15E, F-14, big planes like that, but little planes got their point too. Drop our seat back down here in a minute too once we get rolling in a straight line. And we'll put a couple 1,000 pounds back in our thimble. And we'll be well on our way again. All right. Arm and rearm. And we had some shots left in the gun. Okay, so I like the Mark 83s, I can keep those. Got a few different Sidewinder variants we could carry. I think we're going to opt for Zunis. And a couple of old school World War II bombs. With 4-second fusing on them.
Request refueling. Request rearming.
Alright, so while we're having all that happen, which should be fairly quick, we're going to pop back over here just to look at our carnage so far. We're going to focus on eliminating the rest of these groups, probably take care of the rest of those 2 Sparka batteries there. Those tanks definitely need to kind of have that happen. I think we'll use those old bombs on it. We can try shooting Zunis here in smaller quantities at the MTLBs and things that are kind of scattered around. Making sure we use that radar. As far as basic navigation goes, there are 2 storable waypoints, much like the A-4. And you have 2 different settings there on that nav panel. The upper portion is the present position. That is where you are right now. And lower port is destination, where you want to go. You can change those by pushing on those little dials and spinning the dials around, manually rolling the rollers until you get to your desired longitude and latitude. Magvar is setting the jet by default once you start up, as well as wind speed. But if you are uncertain as to what those are, or if those things have somehow changed, which right now in DCS they can't, but who knows, maybe in 2027 and beyond we might see weather improvements, where we have variable weather that changes over time. You know, that might be important, because that also figures into your bombing computer to go, okay, the wind is blowing from this far away, so I want to aim at this point, try and help you out. Lower on that panel we have the radio. It's currently set on 266 there for us. You can do channel mode. I'd have to actually jump out of the jet and change a bunch of things in the mission editor, but I think the channel modes can be changed as well, and it should update that page as far as what's on what. TACAN appears to be broken in the jet right now. I know it has worked before in previous versions of the jet, however, whatever update DCS has currently had, the A-4 team hasn't changed the mod at all to correct that. The compass settings back here are clickable, however they are all unimplemented and don't actually do anything. So we have our interior lights, all those settings. Oh. Right, the ground crew's not doing anything for me because where have they? No, I don't believe they have. Had to open the window to yell at them. They just couldn't read my mind from inside the aircraft.
Request refueling. Request rearming. Copy.
That's better. Well, the emergency levers work. Manual flight controls, emergency generator, emergency bomb release, and emergency landing gear handle. Those all do what they need to do, as advertised on the tin. It's a good plane, and for an aircraft that has no cost with it, as it is a mod, it is one of the only mods that I've seen and played with and did things with that is of or approaching module quality in a big way. Personally, I think DCS is at its best when it's doing Cold War era type stuff. Can make an argument for getting closer to like early 2000s type stuff too, where most of the aircraft are in their present forms and could put the work in. But I really would like to see more Vietnam era type assets actually hitting the field. I know the F-100D has been in development for a while. Of course, there's been some big drama about the A-1 Sky Raider. That's been problematic lately. Like that whole team's been having some troubles and some struggles, and due to lack of communication have been faced with more of their own issues with having some of their APIs and stuff pulled. Hopefully that can get resolved. Razbam, of course, has a bunch of issues still going on with it, which means we're probably going to lose not only my favorite airframe, but a handful of others. Losing 4 aircraft, essentially, when Vulcan API comes out, as that'll be 3.0 for DCS, and those aircraft are not going to be supported any longer. So hopefully they can work out their differences or whatever, or ED can pull some kind of miracle out of its hat and make things work there. Not holding my breath for it, though. But with the AI A6 Intruder, I'm very excited for the day when Heapler puts a player-driven Intruder out. Like, I'll be killing Sams, doing Iron Hand, and making history as my Flight of the Intruder comes out. Yeah, no kidding. Scuzzy StarCraft. Of course, there's a lot of other core components that haven't had updates in a long time too. Like, you can make some arguments that super carriers had 1 or 2 in the last year or two, but it's not really been super meaningful. Having the navigation around the deck is immersive, and I do love that. That is a good change, but where's my deck crew options for Forestall, since you can do that for oh hell, what ship is it? Stennis? Yeah, the Stennis. Without having the supercarrier module purchased, the Stennis operates without a deck crew. If it does have the supercarrier module, though, it operates with one, and both people can operate off the same deck, so clearly that's not a problem. The issue is just, you know, Forestall isn't ours, so I'm going to be Nick Gray about it and be mad. It was very sad. All right, round 2 against Yucca Pass. The light attacker, we just can't bring up enough heavy weapons to do the job on our own the first time. I'm going to leave the flaps down a tick there. We got a little closer to the ground than I would like. But we are substantively heavier than what we were just a little bit ago. We should be good now. Shuttering will slow down here as we get above 200 knots. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing back in air-to-ground mode. We're dropping bombs first, so we're going to go back to computer so we can use the air-to-ground radar for ranging information. And we'll start with the Mark 83s. Tail fusing selected. Master arm is on. Let's take this into single mode. Turn off all of our ripple information there. As those bombs are big enough, I only want to drop them one at a time. About 28 miles to go back to our waypoint. We've largely thinned the herd, but we will make use of that air-to-ground radar again to drop our weapons with some good precision. It's a very basic but extremely effective system for putting unguided bombs right where you want them to go. Got a bunch of folks on watching right now, appreciate that. And if my moderator's around, thank you for the coffee cup warmer. It is working effectively. She might not be up at this time though. Usually the DCS Saturday teaching stream is me solo for that. Scooter's very much capable of air refueling as well. The only issue I think at the moment is that on this particular mission that I put together, these tankers are moving a little too quick for me to be able to catch up with it, but we could try it. Let me see if we can go hook up to the MPRS once we're clean. With an internal tank of about 5,500 pounds, it's very quick to refuel. Operationally in the real world, a lot of A4s would operate either with a large single bag in the center, or more commonly 2 smaller bags on the inner pylons for the wings where those Zuni rockets are sitting right now. As the centerline pylon is really, really best used for bringing your heavy bombs into play. Yeah, if we get clean, we should be good to catch up to it. Right now, we're just, you know, almost as aerodynamically dirty as an F4, so... Can't make the airspeed happen at high altitude. All right, about 3.5 miles. There's Yucca Pass. In our target environment, we're going to target that other half of the Sparka battery, just in case they want to be uppity and shoot at us. They are damaged, so they may not, but we're going to finish them off. Our first bomb here. They're getting a pulse frequency from something, though. It's probably the AWACS and other aircraft that are in the area, because it really doesn't discern too much outside of giving you the actual PRF of the radar to listen to. All right, here we go. As before, for people who might have missed it earlier, we are in air-to-ground mode with the radar and in computer mode. We have the solid line that tells me I'm getting good ranging information. Pipper on target, push the button, pull back on the stick. Bomb falls off the jet. Goes right where we want it. And the vertical scan line is just moving up and down like this. The radar is not actually locating anything on the ground to give you ranging information for. And there is some kind of vehicle down at the bottom of this mountain. It's like a lone BMP. Don't want to kill him just yet, I don't think, especially not with an 83. But there are a couple of vehicles parked next to that gray structure near the SAM site from earlier. So if we see if we can't split the difference with a heavy bomb there and get both items. Line is solid, which means that we are getting good ranging information from under the Pipper. A little close to that bomb, but it did what we needed to do. Let's see, groups of targets. They're all dead. Buildings destroyed. Okay, well, there's the MTLBs and a lone BMP. They're kind of separated rather well, but might be able to damage a couple of them there. Extend for briefly and then come back around for them. Little red receive light on the ECM panel there tells us that we've got a radar that is being detected. But without a proper RWR, direction unknown, type unknown. Upsy daisy. And I cooked the MTOBs, thin-skinned as they are. Some of the fragments damaged a few things very lightly. Alright, so that's it for those bombs. Let's drop our fuse delayed ones there. We're actually going to do this in a ripple. Ripple 2. Go with 110 milliseconds. Now these we've got a delayed fuse on. So they should... Oh, you know what? I don't think I put the tail fuse as plugged. So they might actually detonate on their own anyway. So rather than do the lay down or low altitude, high speed pass with those, we'll drop them as usual, as we've been doing so far with the computer. Try really hard not to accidentally oopsie ourselves. Turn that down a little bit, because it's probably just the AWACS search radar that we keep hearing. Alright, so we know they're in that gray box adjacent to the road. That's what we're going to line up and run in on. Good enough. And we rolled the wings a little much there. Yeah, I'm glad we didn't go low altitude on that. Alright, we got our Zunies left. Yeah, I still want to fire in pairs. It'll give us a few more trigger pulls. And we'll look for some single targets in our area there. Another ad break's coming up here soon. We're just going to conduct our attack with the Zunies, see if we can't do this a little more precise. Overshot just a little bit. Another BMP down here in the corner of this house. Rockets really kind of are a saturation game, even when they're the heavier versions like Zunies. Close enough to damage, but we're still being thrown off a little bit. Some of that might be my head position with the pipper too. Nope. No, it appears that they may not be. How many more rockets we got? 2, 4, 6 rockets, so 3 more trigger pulls. Yeah, and they don't release in computer mode, which is sad. Two more trigger pulls. I mean, that said, though, you can use the radar watching the bar come down to try and get an idea about how far the target is from you. If you have an understanding about where you need to be to get the rockets to go where you want to go, then you can aim accordingly. I have to play with it a little more, see what kind of long-range rocket fire I can do. Although, you know, if you look at a lot of Vietnam videos, like gun camera footage and that kind of thing, you generally see rocket pods being used in volumes, like entire 19s at a time. All right, you are on 254. All right, we got rid of all of our crap. So we're now clean. And we just need to go chase down this MPRS, and he is Arco 11.
Arco 1-1, Dodge 2, request rejoin. Dodge 2, Arco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 22,000 at 260.
260 indicated at 22,000. Okay, we can probably catch that. We can definitely catch that. I mean, we could before, and once we're clean, but we just have to get up to that altitude. Safe all our things here. Turn our probe light on. Hit our pinky switch for the master lights. And we will climb up to meet him. Set ourselves up for a return to Creech. And we'll grab ourselves a couple 1,000 pounds of gas. Our closure rate is not especially favorable. There we go, we're picking up the knots now. It's going to be off the nose and slightly low. We'll go ahead and fly to intercept him there. Our fueling probe is off the right of the nose and slightly low, which sounds like it might be an ideal or okay type position, but at least it's not an F-100 or a Harrier. Or anything else with a weirdly placed afterthought sort of refueling system that's bent in a bad way and in a weird position on the airframe. I would, but then Twitch would get really mad at me for playing copywritten music. Just have to think about it in your head or pull up your own YouTube panel there on the side while watching this. Alright, so he's doing 260 indicated, so we're still somewhat fast, but we also still need to get there, so we're 3/4 to a mile behind him right now. So we get to within half a mile, he'll turn his lights on, which we might... yeah, it looks like they might be on now. Yeah, exactly, Jolly. That behind your head, above and to the left, completely out of your line of sight refueling nozzle that's also in a bent Z shape is really a joy to try and work with, he said sarcastically. All right, let me cruise up here to the observer position. This should be a lot easier to do than refueling off the A6 with the A4 I was doing yesterday, as that refueling hose is almost as short can be. All right, let's get into it.
Ready, pre-contact. Clear contact.
Broadly speaking, I look to try and have the basket pass through the lower right-hand portion of the glass. At night, the red refueling probe light should illuminate that basket perfectly when you are fairly well aligned, which is a helpful feature to have. Kind of see the red light on it right now.
Contact. You're taking fuel.
Again, thinking ahead of the aircraft, really got to manipulate that throttle, understanding it's going to be a few seconds before that engine responds and provides the power you've asked for. Large corrective inputs require equally large reverse inputs to try and maintain position. I will check the chat messages here in just a second. I'm fixated on trying to maintain position here.
Transfer complete.
There we go.
Disconnect.
Easy peasy. And kill our master light switches there. Yeah, that is an interesting New Jersey law. Thankfully, though, we're over Nevada, so I've got a cocktail waitress that's actually going to walk out from the plane and, you know, offer you a couple of glasses of alcohol while you sit in front of the slot machines as they refuel the aircraft. All right, folks, with that, we're going to go ahead and return to Creech. Actually, I think we'll fly the distance back to Nellis. Why not? First things first, though, we are in the A4, and I'm up at a decent altitude, so there's something that all A4 drivers should probably do at least once, and that is take a nap while you're flying. You can tell whenever the pilot wakes up as I'm just holding the stick to the left. Woo! That roll rate. Just immediately send all the blood in your brain box to your toes. And then take a nap. Now, while we're down here, we'll go ahead and we'll use that terrain following or terrain contour mode, TC. And we'll fly back to Vegas. Yeah, no, I know. Cognizant of the fact that we're pointing down at the ground. It's okay, radar, I promise. Okay. So let me know that there are potential obstacles in the way out to the maximum detection threshold of the radar. But just like with the F-15, for as long as we have it, or the F-111, if you've seen YouTube videos about its terrain following radar, which are out there. Periscope Films has really put out a bunch of those that are really nice to look at for old school stuff. Training videos, you know, introductions to the Tomcat. You can listen to Navy admirals talk about what we thought the MiG-25 and the MiG-23 were going to do prior to us actually knowing the capabilities of those airframes. But there's some out there on the F-111's radar system, which the way this thing works looks very similar to that. So if you need a deep dive primer into what that actually reads and how to translate it, that's where I would go. But the short answer to it is, since we are in profile mode, we can see that we are doing a 10-mile scan. Here on the little airplane, you see the little 10 symbol there. And while we are in this mode, this is our airplane. This is presumably a level flight curve, and this is the actual radar return on a logarithmic scale. So it's, you know, very short, out to 10 miles, and a not quite, you know, linear progression as far as how far that distance is of the terrain features ahead of us. So as I dip the nose down just a little bit, so I'm pointing at the base of the mountain there, you can see that the top of the mountain is rapidly closing in on the aircraft, and it's in our way. Pull the nose up above it, that's going to fall off. Which tells us that this airspace is safe for us to fly in, even if I had zero visibility and was reliant upon just the radar to fly. And the obstacle warning really just kind of appears for anything out to 10 miles. So if you are flying just in level flight, everything's hunky-dory, you've got no warnings whatsoever, and then one appears, you can expect that to be about 10 miles out. And conversely, if we were super low, and we got this mountain out here in front of us. Now right now it's not a problem, it's a little distant, but as we get closer, since my nose is definitely below the horizon line there for that, and I've got terrain in front of me that we can see, as we get closer we should have the obstacle warning go off, and you'll see that line cross our profile path. Much like it is now. Letting us know that we are approaching something that we are going to run into if we don't provide some kind of corrective input. And again, this is on a mod. Like, this is a modded aircraft. This is not one that is a module to purchase in DCS. The A-4 community mod is free to download, and it has a terrain contour radar just out the gate. ED is still struggle busing with making that happen for the F-16 and the F-18. Both of which should have some kind of terrain avoidance type mode. The F-15E, though, that one's the best, because with that nav flare pod and the terrain following radar and navigation controls and everything else, you can fly hands-free 100 feet off the deck on autopilot going from waypoint to waypoint and have it avoid terrain for you automatically. It's a wild ride to have, which I would encourage you doing before the Vulcan API comes out. And if you already have the F-15E module, because you can't purchase it anymore on the ED website. All right, we're going to go ahead and come in on Nellis. Let's go ahead and raise our seat up so we can look down the nose of the airframe. As, you know, if we're on AOA, we're going to need to do that in order to be able to see where we're going. Turn our lights on, turn the probe light out. Start reducing power a little bit. We'll set up for an overhead brake for runway 21 left. You're really looking for the Navy flying experience. Appreciate the follow there, Puffin Power 29. You're looking for the Navy flying experience too, especially coming back to a ground base. Oh, right, let's turn that off. Overhead brakes are basically case 1 patterns, just like you'd be coming around back to the boat. You just use the midfield of the runway as your point to turn. A little high, but are otherwise at our target speed. Let's come on down here a little bit. No, I did say 2-1 left, which is why we're lined up on 2-1 right, because we're basically mimicking the flying past the boat at about 800 feet and 350 knots as we brake the deck at about the midfield here. Reduce power, speed brake comes out. 250 knots, gears soon start coming down. 225 knots, flaps are going to come down. And just like with the F4, I'm adjusting trim as we're coming through this. Sometimes you have to do that in a Tomcat as well. Understandably, there's no round down for us to look at and know when we need to turn around. I'm also using a much higher RPM setting here because I've got the pedals out. And for those of you who are joining us just now and missed the first landings that we made about this one, we land with the speed brake out so that we can keep a higher engine RPM, as the older engines on this particular model of A4 are not particularly responsive. All right, there's about 45 degrees down the wing line. Start turning around. So for a safety measure, land with higher RPM, speed brake deployed, just like with the F-14A, not the B. So that way, if you need to get out in a hurry, you can leave your engine RPM high and just pull the pedals in so that you're not waiting a week for the engine to give you the power that you need to try and get out of your problem. We are a little fast, so I'm also reducing power again. It is a field landing. I'm going to turn the spoiler arm on, which I should have done earlier, but we'll do it here. We'll probably float down a little ways, but with that spoiler, we'll be able to come to a stop. It's our low altitude warning. There's AOA. Able to look down the nose where we need to go. This is going to be beautiful. We're going to be right in the tire tracks there. all dirtied up. Spoilers are up on the top edge of the flap. Really don't have a whole lot of horizontal stabilizer action there. Really kind of disrupt airflow and act as an additional speed brake. Not an all-flying tail at all. Bring our seat back down. Turn on the air conditioning. And we'll clean up for taxi. A little quick for using the differential braking, so skid it to a stop a little bit. There is no nose wheel steering in the jet. That front wheel is basically just on a caster, like a rolling chair. All right, we are stopped. I'm going to start turning off all the things that we turned on, our countermeasures, our ECM, navigation, alignment, TACAN, radio, the radar. And with just a couple of right clicks while at engine idle, or left click rather, lock that throttle all the way to stop. And we're home. The next few weeks, we're going to be spending a lot of time with the A-4 Skyhawk. We should be doing a little bit of carrier work off the Forestall. We'll do a little bit of air-to-air work here in the NTTR. Might even do a little bit of like dissimilar combat with that one. We'll see if we can't borrow Trigger or I order somebody to fly an F-14 and volunteer to get gestured. And then we'll round all of that out with a carrier strike with intruders, F4s, A4s, whole 9 yards against a target over the next handful of weeks. So I hope you've enjoyed our little introduction to the A-4 Skyhawk so far. Again, it's one of the few mods that I've encountered out there that really does come close to module quality. Very good project, very good machine, a lot of fun to fly. Got a lot of tricks, quirks, and everything else about her that really kind of gives you the same sort of feel that you find from Heapler modules. Very responsive, very visceral feeling aircraft. The whole thing shakes and shudders as you go through certain flight regimes. The engine takes a little bit of getting used to with the lack of response. It is a good machine and fun to fly. So I hope you will make an opportunity to go up and do things with that and have a great time. With that, folks, for the rest of the week, we should be on schedule to actually do all the things that are listed there at this time. So we should be up doing regular DCS stuff there on Monday, following that up with classic games. ARMA 3 should be on for this week as I'm not closing this week. And then we'll be back again for DCS Saturday for Pilum teaching, where we will continue on with the A-4. We're probably going to do the boat operations off Forestall, a little bit of recovery type stuff there on that, and start there on those aspects of it. So come back next week for all of that. Should be a great time. With that, always ask for consent. Try to communicate as best you can with your partners. Try to be genuinely decent human beings. And I will catch up with you next time. Thanks for watching, folks. Thanks for flying. Have a great day.